It was the end of a long, bitter day. I'd been in the theatre working solidly for 14 hours, fixing up some units ready for the evening shows. It was the cast's first time at doing this show, and members of head office were on board to see that it went right. The show went without a hitch, and the bigwigs were happy for a change. It was the most ambitious and technically challenging show ever to be put on a ship. The set constantly morphs from scene to scene using track bars, fly bars and Serpide tracks. There was a crew disco on until 1 AM. I looked at my watch. It was 10 to 1. The Canadian and I legged it up to the bar and ordered enough drinks to keep us going for a few hours. As soon as our drinks arrived, the shutters calmed down. We picked up our drinks and headed towards the rec room. The disco was still on, though there was no one dancing at this point. It was like a ghost town. The Canadian and I headed into the smoking room, hoping to bump into the usual suspects. There weren't many people in the room or stained to death. Just a few of the shoppies. Where was everyone? It was a port day tomorrow, so people would be recovering from the potential debauchery of the night hence. The Canadian and I sat next to the shoppy girls, Newcastle and Midlands. We talked, drank and smoked for a long while. The tune started to pump and the dance floor started to come alive. Newcastle took my hand and dragged me into the dance floor, followed by Midlands and the Canadian. The dance floor was a sausage fest. The only girls on the dance floor were Newcastle and Midlands. The rest of the floor was full of the Indian boys. This left the girls in a tricky position. All the Indian boys were attempting to dance with the girls, and they had none of it. Newcastle, to protect herself, started to provocatively gyrate her hips to me, as did Midlands to the Canadian. Girls know how to enforce self-preservation on dance floors. I've seen this behaviour before many times. I was dancing and grinding with Newcastle. Every so often, one of the Indian boys would try and cut in, but each time this happened, I pulled her close to me and ground even harder. It was bliss. Not often could I get away with this, and after all, I'm quite shit at dancing. It turned out that quite a lot of these Indian boys didn't freshen up after their shifts, as each time they asked people to raise their hands and make some noise, a dance floor filled with extreme body odour. Sometimes it was that bad you could chloroform someone with that repugnant stench. I left the dance floor to go for a cigarette with Newcastle in tow. An Indian lad put his arms around Newcastle's shoulders, trapping her. Then the stench hit her like an atomic bomb. She retched in his face. His arms released her and Newcastle bailed from the dance floor in double quick time and burst into the smoking room, taking deep breaths in. She looked absolutely mortified. I could tell this as she pulled 2 cigarettes out of her box, lit and smoked them together. She came over to me, sat on my lap and popped one of her cigarettes into my mouth. Menthol cigarettes. Damn, those things are like smoking polos. I didn't complain about this as I had a hot girl sat on my lap. I couldn't take much more of this, she gasped. I put my arms around her waist and hugged her. Right, I said, let's move this to my cabin. She looked at me with a smile. Midlands and the Canadian walked in. We're moving to my cabin, I proclaimed to them. Lisbon from the casino and her friends from the spa happened to walk into the smoking room at this point of time. I asked them if they wanted to come to mine. They gave me a look of gratefulness as they looked mortified after battling through too much cheers on the dance floor. There was some Bhangra music blasting over the PA system. We all looked at each other and without a word we went to leave the crew bar. The looks on some of these Indian boys' faces were of anger and sorrow, as the Canadian and I had taken away the only 4 girls in the disco. On our hasty flight out of the crew bar, some of the Indian boys tried to dance aggressively in our way in a vain attempt to win the girls' affection. It didn't work. It actually had the opposite effect. Pure revulsion. Newcastle and Midlands just pushed these desperate fiends out of the way on our exit. We made our way down to my cabin, stopping en route at the girls' cabin for them to reload with booze. By the time we arrived at Party Central, my cabin, there was about 3 Indian boys standing outside. I thought to myself, shit, have my movements been noticed around this shit for 3 random people that I've never met before to be standing outside my door? I was not pleased, nor did I want any of these dickheads to come to my party and piss off my guests. Can I help you guys? I said. One of them instantly replied in a thick Indian accent, we're here for the party. What party? I said. Oh, the one that you guys aren't invited to. You two took all the girls and we want to party with the girls. Hold on, I said. Wait here. I opened up my cabin and ushered in the Canadian and the girls. I put the latch on the door and looked into each and every one of the Indian boys' eyes. They looked uncomfortable. The 3 of you wait here. I left them at the door and went to my cabin. I deliberately left the door open so everyone could see them and they could see in. I went over to my desk and opened up a top drawer. I pulled out an old copy of Playboy and I went to the fridge and pulled out 3 cans of beer. Then I returned to the door, took the door off the latch bit and tossed them each a beer. I threw one of the boys the Playboy and said, if you want to party with some girls, take the mag and have a wank and fuck off in the process. I then slammed the door hard, went over to my laptop and pumped the music up. There was a round of applause, joyful shouting, screaming and laughing. I looked out of the spy hole and saw them walking away with their heads bowed. I had clearly ruined their day, but I'd be fucked if they'd be ruining my day by pissing off the girls with their lecherous antics. Newcastle pulled out the light from both of my life jackets and placed them in a glass each. She then filled up the glass with water, which brought the hydrostatic lights to life. She put one either side of the room and switched off the main lights. The room was now dark with strobe lights and the glow from my laptop. We resumed dancing and grinding. The drinks kept flowing and Midlands came up with a new drink, half a bottle of Magners and a quadruple vodka stirred with a straw. I have to admit, I thought it was a bad idea, but it tasted great. We were all on it, and the night started to become a bit more risque in a sexual way. Lisbon and her friend decided that it was time for them to leave when they saw Newcastle and I grinding deep into each other. I wasn't paying attention to the Canadian and Midlands, who were dancing as I was too engrossed in what I was doing. I'm sure it was just as sexual. Midlands and Newcastle at the same time began to kiss both Canadian and myself. This was it. I thought to myself, I was going to dip my wick tonight. I'm not going to lie, but as I was being kissed, I could feel a semi-on happening. It felt good. I could feel the blood flowing around my body, and I could swear I could feel Newcastle's pheromones just smashing into me like a truck pile driving a wall. Midlands took the Canadian by the hand and led him out of my cabin. Fuck knows where they went, and to be brutally honest, I didn't care. I was just interested in getting balls deep in Newcastle. I went in for the kill, started to kiss Newcastle while still grinding with her. It was time to go that one step further and put my hands on her hips and slowly move my hands up to her tits. I took those huge lumps of divine jugs in my palms and she reciprocated by planting her hands on my hips and laying them over my crotch. As I was caressing her firm tits, she started to caress my throbbing cock. She stopped kissing me and then moved her mouth over to my ear. Not till I'm married, she whispered. It was like someone had just scratched a needle across a record. I came to a complete stop with caressing her juicy knockers. I thought like, what the fuck? She was egging me on by touching my cock, and then she just totally cock teased me. That was so fucking uncool, I said calmly. So you're no sex before marriage girl then? She smiled and looked me in the eye. Doesn't mean you can't finger me though. So if I can't have sex with her, but I can finger her instead, what kind of religious psychobabble was that? You can't have sex, but God allowed you to get fingered. I was disappointed, but I took her up on the offer. She was that hot. How could I refuse to give myself an arm ache for her pleasure? Okay, but only if you toss me off, I said to her. Done, she replied. She dropped her skirt and took her top off. She didn't remove her knickers or bra. I looked at her perfect body and removed my clothes. I stripped down to my boxers and she pushed me onto the bed. She then straddled me and started to rub her knickers-bound crotch over my boxer-clad cock. It felt good, and that's all I'm going to say on the matter. You must be thinking as the reader that you're feeling a bit cheated and let down over this ending, but put yourself in my place. I didn't get the conclusion that I wanted, but there would be another time with Newcastle, and yes, the no sex before marriage thing was her sense of humour and winded me up.